Hello world, I'm artist Mary Blue Brady. Welcome to my studio. The BBC has invited me to do some brief 10-minute making sessions to help jumpstart your creativity. And today's session is how to keep an art journal. And I've been making art journal since it was assigned as a course requirement for a class I was taking when I went to university, and I loved it so much that even when the course ended, I continued doing journaling. I found that an art journal will enable you to focus your thoughts, experiment with ideas, you can track your themes over time. And when I look back over my journals, I notice that there are themes developing that are important to me, and I try to express them visually in my studio work. And they're recurring themes about edges and edges meeting. It's about noticing the far horizon. It's about a sense of time. It's the interrelatedness of nature. It's the power of the elements to change a landscape. So let's get started. What do you need? Blank journal. You need pens and pencils and markers, glue stick, sellotape, and things that you can include in your journal are clippings that inspire you from a magazine or print of any kind, musings about life, their relevant thoughts on movies seen, books read, music, poetry, theater, recollections of great conversations with friends. Some of you have said, "Oh, I think I remember you being in those journals," and I definitely can say you're in these journals. There are any quotes that spark your imagination, sort of any and all ideas. So I like to start with a date. This journal I started in 2015, and I write down where I'm living at the time. So this has been in Wood Norton, Kettlestone, and now it's here with me in Wells next to the sea. But these journals have sort of traveled with me over the course of my life. They've been in Baltimore, Maryland, where I started, Washington, D.C., Florence, Italy, France. They've been with me to Philadelphia, where I lived for a number of years, my hometown. Shout out to Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And now they're back here with me in Britain. The next thing I do is I write an intention or a quote. This one is Blackberry Winter by Margaret Mead. And when I started this journal, I was reading about Margaret Mead, Blackberry Winter. A friend of mine gave me this book. And there we have Margaret Mead. She studied in New York. She's from my hometown, and she's a sociologist. And she started her book with this quote: "Blackberry winter, the time when the hoarfrost lies on the blackberry blossoms. Without this frost, the berries will not set. It is the forerunner of a rich harvest." So I wrote that in there to sort of jumpstart, my writing for this particular journal. I often cut out newspaper articles. Actually, back in the day when you had newspapers, now everything's online. This is an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer from February 9th, 1997. It's the spirit of modernism, and the first line is, "Poets and painters have long been natural allies." So that's another thing that helps me with my work is poetry, and I write bits of poetry in my work. I write my own poetry, and that finds its way into my work. I will write it down on the base, and then I will layer a painting over with it. So it's sort of hidden within the brushstrokes, but then some of the text I like to pull back out and I'll write on top. So it's a real push-pull. I'm gonna recommend this book, Rumi, The Soul of Rumi, which is fantastic. Over the course of the last year, I've painted the lunar calendar, and I was inspired by a quote of Rumi's. It says, "Thirst drove me to the water's edge where I drank of the moon's reflection." And I'm fortunate enough to live in this beautiful location where I go out and walk the salt marsh at night with the full moon, and its reflection is on the water. The same, I'm right off the North Sea, and so I go out and paint at night, and I write my own words in anything I notice. So I'm going to recommend that type of poetry. The other thing is when I go to art museums, if a particular artist that I like inspires me, I do a quick little sketch, write a little bit about it, so I know I can go back and reference it. This is Susan Rothenberg, and I saw her work at MoMA back in the 90s, and then I've came across an article about her in a magazine, and I put that out there. And so one of the things that I think is really important in your making process is to absorb other people's inspiration and wisdom. And so this is an article in Newsweek, July 13th, 2001. It's Katharine Graham. She's somebody who's really inspired me throughout my life, but of lots of books that I've read, if somebody inspires me, I put it in here, and it invariably comes and finds its way into work. I think there's an overlap of all of the art disciplines, and that poetry and music and theater and dance, science. Anselm Kiefer is inspired by the string theory, and a lot of that goes into his work. So these are the types of things that you put into your journal to sort of help you inform your making process. I see a lot of film, and if I respond to a film in a certain way, I put that in my journals. For example, I sort of wish there was a soft rain moving in the background, because I love Frank Kurosawa's films, and have to shout out to all the videographers out there, because this is not so easy shooting solo in your own studio. So, I'm just gonna give a little snap to people who are lighting specialists, and I think that just doing your own artwork in your own studio, you need the input of other people, and that's part of what's going on here with the art journals. I also want to say that remember that the journal is a tangible object. It's magical, and we still have journals of Leonardo da Vinci that we can look through and see how he made things, and immerse ourselves in his thought process. And Steve Jobs, all of his early letters are lost to the ether and the mist of time. You don't know what he was thinking as he was coming up with Apple. So that's why one of the things I love about the journal is it's tangible. I can look back, it can jumpstart me onto the next part of my making process. This is a judgment-free zone. So whatever you write, no matter what it is, can feed your making process. Doesn't matter, just put it down. I don't write every day. I write when I have something that sparks me. And I'd like to also say I'm going to recommend this book. This is The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard. A lot of my work also deals with space. I read this book back in the 80s, and I've read it twice since then, but it talks about it's a philosophy about the internal space of a nautilus all the way out to the edges of the universe. And one of the things that my paintings are currently dealing with is the coast of Britain And so I paint from the furrow to the wave to the stars, and I've got a lot of that insight in this book. So that's another book that I'd like to recommend. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, doesn't matter what type of artwork that you're making or what type of art you practice on the larger scale, poet, playwright, musician, Art Journal will really help you move your practice forward. And I hope you have fun just trying it, experiment with it, whatever you do, it works for you. Take a photograph of it, hashtag get creative at home, hashtag everyday making. I'd like to thank the BBC Get Creative 2020 for giving me the opportunity to share this idea with you. And next week we'll be playing with color, and I'll chat about color theory, and we'll practice some mark making. So be well and stay safe. Bye.